by a lot of the things that, trying to learn from mankind, there's a lot of outside influences that's going to damage those lessons, such as internet and Hollywood and news media and all these influences, and you don't have that from watching nature. And I think that's what Job was talking about here is that we can sit and ask the beast, and they shall teach thee. They're going to teach you because you're watching the beast. You're watching some of the things that they do, and you can learn some life lessons from that. Amen? And that's what we're looking at today. We're going to learn about some ants and some conies and some locusts and some spiders, right? Ants. And the ants, it says, are a people not strong, yet they prepare their meat. In the summer, ants are a eusocial insect of the family, and along with related wasps and bees, they belong to an order called Hymenoptera. There's more than 12,500 of an estimated a total of 22,000 species of ants that actually has been classified. They're easily identified by their elbowed antennas, distinctive node-like structure that forms their slender waists. Nearly all ant colonies have some sort of fertile male called drones, and one or more fertile females called queens. The colonies are described as superorganisms. A colony of ants is described as one large organism because the ants appear to operate as a unified entity, collectively working together to support the colony. And when I thought about that, I thought that was interesting. I thought about Brother Heflin. Ever been compared to an ant, Brother Heflin? No? Okay. Well, you are. And I got to thinking about an ant's primary concern is not so much himself, but it's that of the colony. And I thought about Brother Heflin's career. And, his first half of his career, he served to support, to protect the nation, the people, us. And the remainder, we don't know about half, I guess. We won't know that till the end we do the math, right? But the remainder of his career, he's supporting those who support the colony, so to speak. But that's the attitude of a public servant that the ants have. The ants are concerned with the colony and the protection of the colony. There are some, and this was fascinating to me, but there are some ants in each colony that, depending on how the nest is designed, but there are some ants that stays outside and seals it up at dusk. Every evening they seal up the nest, and then they go off somewhere and try to survive the night. Most of the time they don't. Most of the time they get eaten by some predator of the night. But yet the next night some other ants will come up and do the same thing. They'll seal that nest because it can't be sealed effectively from the outside, from the inside. So they seal it from the outside, and then they go off and try to survive the night. Most of the time, not surviving the night, but their concern is for others and the colony and the people, or the feeble folk, as it's described in the following verses. But in other words, they look to the safety of others and put themselves at risk. And I thought that was pretty impressive about the ant. Ant societies also have a division of labor. There's communication between individuals and an ability to solve complex problems. This is pretty fascinating when you think about something that the brain is the size of a tip of a hair follicle or something, right? Pretty impressive. These parallels with human societies have long been an inspiration and a subject of study. We could learn a lot from the ant colonies, right? Ants perform many ecological roles that are beneficial to humans, including the suppression of pest population, aeration of the soil. The use of weaver ants in citrus cultivation in southern China is considered one of the oldest known applications of biological control. In some parts of the world, this is going to make you glad you're not in one of them, Large ants, especially army ants, are used as surgical sutures. They pick up a live ant, hold it over the wound. When the mandibles or claw type things are closed in on the wound, they break its head off, and the mandibles stay there. And they do that repeatedly until the wound is sealed up. Aren't you glad we have sutures in the United States? But that's used in some Africa and South America both. So, be thankful that's not us, right? But that's not what Solomon was impressed with the ant. And there's a lot more, and I could sit here and talk about a whole lot of things about the ant colonies and the ants, and there's a lot of things that are impressive. But what he's speaking of here, he says the ants are a people. They're not strong, yet they prepare their meat in the summer. That's what impressed him enough to comment about that, to say this is what is that this is the wisdom of the ant. This is the thing that Solomon, the wisest man to ever have lived, would consider wise about a little creature, right? And what he's looking at, of course, Proverbs 10:5 says, "He that gathereth in summer is a wise son, but he that sleepeth in harvest is a son that causeth shame." We can learn from the ant. It says, Proverbs 6 says, "Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest." It's wise to gather when you can gather. And it's wise to put some up and to worry about the future, to put some concern about the future. Now, of course, I'm not talking about your 401k, or I'm not talking about your IRA, or your... Well, now, I'm not saying that's not wise, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a spiritual aspect of this, of there's a time coming that we're going to have to be prepared for. There is a future coming that is more important than a 401k. That's more important than your IRA or your savings account. And we need to be gathering now. We need to be concerned with things of God now, before we can't, before a time comes to where it's going to be too late. The ant is wise because it's worrying. Imagine what the ant would be doing. If we see what they're doing when they're just worried about winter, and you see how busy they are. Or imagine the squirrel, or the chipmunk, or the bird preparing the nest. What would they be doing if they knew that there was a heaven and that they had to prepare for it? You think about that. What would they be doing? They would be nonstop. Day after day, from daylight to dark, they would sleep very little, because they really do that now. But what can we learn from that is how much of our time throughout the normal day from daylight to dark is put toward the future, as in the eternal future. And how much are we putting into that versus living the day-to-day stuff? And what we can learn from the ant as well as other beasts is that there is a future to prepare for, and that we need to be putting more focus, more time, and more energy into that as opposed to the present. The ants will have to eat a little bit as they work, but they're only eating so that they can prepare for the future. They're only eating and consuming enough so that they can do their job to prepare for the future. In other words, the only present that they're concerned with is what it takes to prepare for the future. And that's the thing about priorities. That's the thing about priorities that we do need. We need to make heaven our home. And that needs to be our priority. That needs to be our focus. That needs to be our winter that we are preparing for. Because it's coming. The ant knows that winter is coming. The ant knows that they stay really busy until it comes. And they know that there's going to be a time to where whatever they prepared for, all the work that they did, everything that they did, because once that snow comes and packs the nest in, it's too late. The nest is sealed up and it's frozen, and what they have is what they have. And they know that they can't go back out and get more. And not until it's spring, and then by then they got to start all over. But they know at that point that everything I've done during the summer, that's it. That's it. I can't build on that anymore. I've already built on that. And we don't know when winter's coming, and I don't think the ant really has the luxury of a calendar. They don't have weather.com to let them know when winter's coming. Now, they do have, nature does have some things programmed in that gives them an ideal. They have some signs and they have some, but they don't know exactly. If you think about last year, for instance, if you can recall, winter was here before October. In September, it turned cold here. And it really never warmed up. So those signs that they have probably fooled a lot of critters this year. And that happens because you just never know when that time comes. You know, we expect to live to be a ripe old age and die in a hospital bed, you know, with hospice and family all around us. That's kind of what we expect, or dying or sleep at home at a ripe old age. But folks, we can read the obituaries. We can hang around at the hospital for a while, and you can see we have children coming through there. There's teenagers that come through when I worked there in the security, one of my jobs was working the morgue. We signed in and out bodies because it was just somebody that's there all the time, so they kind of trained us on what to do to keep everything all legal-like, and as just somebody. But you wouldn't. I mean, of course, you worked in this business, and Sister Asbury has worked in this business, and they will testify to this true. Death knows there's no age minimum or maximum for that. It comes to all ages. And we never know when that winter's coming, when the end is coming. So what we can do is study from the ants. The ants don't slow down work if they have their nest full. They don't just slow down and say, we can take it easy now. We're good to go. Oh, no, they're going to take and build a bigger nest. And they're going to keep working, and they're going to keep staying busy until they can't work no more. And we can learn from that. And that's what Job has said there, that we can study the beast and learn. And that's what Solomon is calling wisdom. And in John chapter 4, Jesus said unto them, my meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish his work. Say not ye, there are 4 months, and then cometh harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are white already to harvest. There's always a harvest. There's always a work to do for God. There is always a work to do. And he that reapeth receiveth wages and gathereth fruit unto life eternal, that both he that soweth and he that reapeth may rejoice together. You know, there's always a work to do. There's so many people get stuck in, yes, I'm working all right. I'm working on my own salvation. I've got to work out my own salvation with fear and trembling. But you know, so many people, that's all they ever work on is their own. They don't worry about the colony. They don't worry about anybody else. They're only worried about themselves. And that can be a problem. Why is it that we're only evangelistic a week or two before Easter? Why is it that we only get the spirit of giving a week or two before Christmas? Why is it that somehow we see that working toward the harvest is only for certain times of the year? Oh no, when the ant can come out of the ground, the ant starts working. The ant works until they can't work no more. And we can learn from that little critter, the ant. The ant will teach us what to focus on, what to put our time into, and what's really important. What's really important is worrying about the colony and the end of that season. You know what we need to put our efforts into. Yeah, we're going to be saved if we strengthen the colony, because we're going to be saved during that process. The ant is putting up the food, and but their focus is on the colony, and they're putting up the food for that colony. But guess what? When winter comes, they get to eat that food as well. That's right. So they're going to be saved in the process of bringing food to that nest. They're going to survive winter because of that. And we can learn so much from that, because we can look forward to seeing the people that we've witnessed to, that we've taught Bible studies to, that we've served, that we have served. We can enjoy that winter or that season or that time in heaven when we see them there. And how much better is it not only just to go to heaven, but to go to heaven and bring people with you. So much better than just going to heaven, right? So much better. So much better. So we can learn from the ant, right? It's okay to compare you to an ant, isn't it, Brother Heflin? If an ant's a hero, that's all right, ain't it? That's all. And soldiers in general, because that's what soldiers are doing. That's what you got soldiers overseas right now that are staying outside of the nest, and they're protecting the nest, right? And then they got to survive the night. They're putting themselves in harm's way and surviving the night because they sealed the nest off. And that's what soldiers are doing right now. And you know, of course, Brother Heflin teaches it, and I have learned from that when I see somebody wearing those hats, and I thank him for that service, because that's what they did. You know, that's exactly what they did. That's what that soldier that served has done. They have covered up the nest and then had to survive the night. And it's so powerful when you see that soldier and you're thanking him. That's what you're thanking him for. If you was that ant that spent the night inside that nest, how thankful would you be for that ant that stayed out there and covered up that nest? Powerful, powerful. Verse 26 says, the conies are but a feeble folk, yet their houses in the rocks. The conies. Now, it took me a little while to figure out what a coney was. We had some discussion about this because there's a lot of different definitions for coney. You can go and search Webster's, and you can search online and Encyclopedia Britannica, and they all kinds have a different. There's a rabbit called a coney. There is a fish, believe it or not, called a coney. I know of a hot dog called a coney. There are birds even that's called conies. But this particular, when he's talking about this, what he's talking about is it's called a rock badger, or a hyrax, a Syrian rock hyrax is the actual of what the biblical definition of a coney is, or it's a badger basically. It's a little different though. It's not quite a badger either. It turns out the biblical coney is something more like a groundhog. It said it's kind of close to a groundhog, but it's not even that either. So it is a little hard to figure out what a coney is and what they are and what they do. And there are still some living in Israel, and they're called a Syrian rock hyrax. But the first thing that I noticed, and I saw on the African Wildlife Foundation page, is that they don't neatly fit into any other group of animals. They don't. They're separate from everything else. Anybody hear that? They're different than all the other animals, right? Anybody hear that? 1 Peter chapter 2 says, but ye are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, and holy nation, a peculiar people, that you should show forth the praises of him who hath called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. A rock badger is different. It's different than everything else. And it's wise to be different from the world. It's wise. it shows there's a lot of wisdom in being different. There's a lot of wisdom into being different. And I go looking at some pages, and there is a lot about, I'm not the first person to preach on this. I mean, it's been preached before, so I want to go look at what other people have said. That helps me. Pastor taught me in ministry training, milk a lot of cows, churn your own butter, right? All right. So I was milking some cows, and most of what people say about the conies and about this verse of Scripture is that they make their houses in the rocks. And that's even what Solomon said. And of course, that would be representing the rock, right? The solid foundation, Jesus Christ, the rock. And that's good. That's good. That's good. Their favorite pastime, it says, is singing. Singing. That's what they do. They just sing all the time. While they're eating, while they're running around, and while they sing. I don't know, whatever kind of singing it is. It's not like what we do, I'm sure, but it's singing. And you almost think if they're just a feeble folk, and if they're just little bitty guys that don't really have any defense, and they don't have any strength, and they don't have, what they got to sing about. But that's something else we can learn. They got a lot to sing about. They have a rock to go to when in times of need. They have a rock. Thank God for the rock. Thank God for the rock. They got something to sing about because they have a rock. They have a rock to go to. It says here that they stay near the protection of their dens. They don't venture off. They don't go off into the world where it's dangerous because they're happy right there near the rock. Y'all hear me, church? They're happy. They're content right near the rock. They don't venture off too far. So if it's wise to be different, and I want wisdom, I wanted to find something else, not just what all the other preachers were saying about a rock badger, okay? So I had to dig a little deeper, and I started searching out all the little lifestyles and all the little things that they do. And I wanted to find something that I could learn from the coney that I can bring to you today that you just won't go and find by reading other people's sermons. All right? And I don't think I found this by reading other people. Well, I know I didn't find it. I'm not saying it's not out there. A lot of people preach a lot of stuff, right? One thing that the Hyraxes do, and of course it says that they live in groups that range from 10 to as many as 80 members of this group. And what they do is they post a sentry while they're gathering for food. This is an organization skill that they have. And they put a sentry, and it's usually the daddy of all the little rock badgers. And he gets up and he's watching, and he'll look and he'll watch while everybody else is feeding, and everybody else is searching for food to put up and prepare because they learn from the ants too. So they're putting up food and they're eating and they're doing whatever. But there's always a sentry that's posted, that's elevated up top, and he's looking and he's watching. And if he sees a wolf coming, or some other thing that could pose danger to him, he has this call, and when he calls this call, they all scurry and they go to the rocks and they hide. And they do that. And it says this protection works so well that is very rare for one of them to be eaten by the South Judean wolves. It works. Somebody say it works. It works. It works. Ezekiel 33 says, "So thou, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth and warn them from me." You hear that? Warn them who? From who? From God. To stay near in Ezekiel 33:7, again, he says, "They shall hear the word at my mouth and warn them from me." From me. See, your man of God is your watchman. Your man of God is your sentry. That is your sentry. While we're busy scurrying around looking for food, working our jobs, going to work day in and day out, sometimes venturing a little farther than 150 feet from home. And while our head is down to the ground because we have to do that in order to find the food, it's here. And it's here, and we have to look up under the rocks and under the trees. God has placed a watchman. And that watchman has an elevated viewpoint. That watchman can see up high. And he can and he can see things that we may not be able to see because we're busy looking for food. Because we are busy on the ground looking for food. Thank God for the watchman. Thank God for the watchman. You think you can see the devil coming, but when you're looking for food, you can't see that. Sometimes some things are coming that it takes not just, and maybe pastor wouldn't see it in his flesh, but it said there that warn them from me. And I promise you, God's going to see it better than pastor will. Pastor's job is to warn us because God is showing us. God is showing us through the watchman. What would it do the rock badger any good at all if when that daddy rock badger started screaming that cry and he just said, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just going to hang here and eat. The reason the rock badger survives is simply because they take action when the daddy rock badger fires off the warning. They hear the warning and they act on that warning and they go to the rock. They go to the rock when they hear the warning. That is how they survive. It's not because of the watchman. The watchman doesn't protect him. The watchman sounds the call. And I would say in nature, if you were watching this group of rock badgers, that watchman sounds the call, and most likely he goes into hiding as well. That's the way it works. And those little ones don't have to learn, you don't learn that lesson. You don't learn that lesson. So when the call is sounded, everybody scurries until the wolf leaves. And then they can come back out. But why they survive, why the rock badger survives is not just because of the warning. It's because they act on the warning. It's because they hear the warning and they don't give it no thought. They go to the rock and they go and hide. And we don't find, and I'm sure because I have studied nature, I've been there with them and I've seen for hours. They don't really sit and philosophize about things, and they don't really put all this stuff into it. Like, well, you know, what if that call was this, or what if maybe he just saw what he thought was a wolf. Maybe he's mistaken, or maybe his wolf is going to be a nice wolf and not eat me. Or maybe his view of a wolf is different than mine. Maybe he really just don't know what a wolf is. They don't do that. They hear the call and they scurry and they go to the rock. And they stay in the rock. They're not interested in anything else because they know that's what's going to make them survive. They go to the rock when the watchman calls. And although I understand that sheltered in the rock was what Solomon was talking about, but really God spoke to me about that watchman. And I wanted to share that with you about the conies. And we can learn so much from this particular example as well, but it's not going to do us any good unless we act on it. It's not going to do us any good. We've came here and we've heard something and we've been entertained and we left. Unless we take something from that, unless we take something from this and are changed because of it. Are we going to wonder the next time the watchman sounds the alarm? Should we scurry? I'm going to tell you right here in the Holy Ghost, yes, you should scurry. You should scurry because the watchman or the sentry or the daddy rock badger has a higher elevation point than you do. He sees more. Now, he's also responsible for all, and that's another whole message, and that's another whole thought. All right? There's a lot to his job. He's here. And you know, he has to eat too. And he has to make sure that he's always sharp and his eyes are always focused on the possible dangers. And it even said there that this system works. I am sure that the wolf gets a badger from time to time. Sometimes the badger may not hear the call. Sometimes the badger may not show up and the call was made on a Wednesday night. Sometimes the badgers may not have their ears pointed in the right direction. And sometimes they venture off a little bit too far, out of the audible range of that sentry. And if that badger was to wander off a little bit too far, out of the range of where they could hear that sentry, then they're going to be the first target of that wolf. The wolf is not going to come and grab the one in the middle. He's going to get one on the outskirts. The wolf is going to attack the one that's farthest away from its protection. In every case. In every case. Boy, I like the ant and the coney so far. I prepared for this, and I'll be honest with you. I don't have anything as good for the spider and the locust. Confession's good for the soul. So you've already got the meat of the matter. But I got a couple pretty good things. But I really enjoyed the ant and the coney. And I hope you did too. The next one is about the locust. And when I looked at the locust, I struggled finding anything good about a locust. There's not really a lot good about the locust. They freed the Jews, one of 10 things. So there was something good about the locust there, right? But he says the locusts have no king, yet go they forth, all of them by bands. And I got to thinking about, they move around and move about without a king. And I remember a time where Israel moved about without a king, about an earthly king. And they come to Samuel in 1 Samuel 8 and says, and the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people, and all that they say unto thee, for they have not rejected thee, but they've rejected me, that I should not reign. And we do get wrapped up in a whole lot of things and who's leading us and all the politics of the world. And I loved that last Wednesday, Brother Heffen. I don't want to be Democrat, Republican, or independent or anything else, but I want to be Christian. Christian. And if there was ever come up with a party Christian, I'm sure I would be right in line to sign up. But we're not led by man as a Christian. We need to be led by God. And these people didn't want to be led by God. They wanted to be like everybody else. They wanted to be like everybody else. And I'm back to the badger again, because the badger's not like everybody else. And we don't need to be like everybody else. We don't need to be led by all the things of this world. We need to be led by the things of God. We need to make sure that our leading is by the things of God. And when you think of what nature is, I'm guilty myself at times of using the term Mother Nature, because that's what we're talking about with nature. But really, that is the things of God. And that's the way God works in this universe, is all these natural occurring things. And, it just amazes to me some of the things. I got a few chickens at the house, and, this spring, right about time when the chickens should be nesting, I had one what they call broody. They go broody. And all they do is sit on a nest for 21 days. They sit on a nest. They'll get up and just for a few minutes at a time. But, this hen, we raised her from a chick, and she's never been around a rooster. She's never been around other adult hens. They all grew up together, So, but somehow that she knew that. I can't figure that out. But somehow she knew that it's time to set on some eggs. She's sitting on unfertile eggs, unfortunately. So I just have to lift her off and get my eggs out. Make her mad every day. But she was just set there, and she sat there for 21 days. And how that works, I don't know. But how does the ants know to do what they do? How does the squirrels know to do what they do? And we don't teach them anything. We don't train them. It's a God thing. It's a nature thing, and when you talk about nature, you're talking about things of God, because He created everything to be perfect. And when you see the locusts, it is pretty amazing to me. Although they are destructive and they destroy and they feed on everything, but they go underground and they stay underground for 17 years. 17 years. Well, they go dormant. I guess their eggs stay 7 days. They die. The locust that swarms actually die, but they lay an egg in various places. And I guess we're probably about 10 years. 10 years. We're probably about 10 years since the last locust. Does anybody remember? 10, 11? 10, 11 years. It's been a while in this area. So in another 3 or 4 or 5 years, something like that. I don't know exactly when it was, but they're just going to come out of the ground. They know when it's time to come out of the ground and eat everybody's crops. And when they fly, they don't have a leader. We used to raise honeybees when I was a kid, and what would happen is the honeybees, when the hive got so strong, one queen would be dominant, and then there was another up-and-coming queen, so to speak. And instead of fighting to the death, many times that other queen that probably could survive would just take off, and a bunch of bees would follow her. And I've sat and watched swarms, and they'll come out of the box. And it looks like a funnel cloud, like a tornado. And it's amazing. We'd stay back and watch them. And we would just follow them all the way up to the woods. And we'd just stay safely back, and we'd watch them. And it would just be so neat how they would just fly like a funnel cloud up into the woods until they found somewhere to land on. And they would land somewhere temporarily first. And then they would move to where somewhere more permanent or whatever. Of course, we caught them and put them in a box. But that's what we did. But nobody told them to do that. They just did it. But now locust is not like that. Locust doesn't have like a queen or a king locust that flies in a direction. They all know. They all know where to go, and they just go here. And when they take off, you'll see, if you've ever seen a swarm, they'll go this way and then they'll go that way, and they just know to go wherever they're going to go. And that's what he's talking about, is they don't have like a leader that's necessarily they have to follow. They just know because they're following ways of nature. And they're following the ways of God, so to speak, and they're doing so. But and of course, comparing this to the watchman who is telling us, sounding off warnings and all of this. And Pastor has come up here many times, and some things I just don't have to tell you. There's some things that you just don't need to hear from the watchman, like showing up for church on Wednesday nights. You don't need to hear that from the watchman. You don't need to hear, come 30 minutes early for prayer and go back there. Don't come 30 minutes for prayer and stay up here and talk, but go back there and pray. But some things you just don't need to hear from the watchman. You don't need to hear from the watchman that we don't have TVs. We don't go to the movies. We don't go to bars. We don't drink alcohol. We don't smoke. We don't cuss. We don't need to hear that from the watchman. If the watchman didn't have to sit and tell us that over and over and over, he could really keep more focus and watch out for the wolf. But some things we need to just know because we're following God. We're following nature. We're following, we just need to just know some things. And if we show up early for prayer, and if we listen to the message, and if we pray other times besides here, and if we read our Bible, there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily need to hear from the watchman because we're going to know God's going to put that in us. The way it's in the locust. The way it's in the locust just knows to go here and knows to go there. And he knows some things. And there's some things, each person has an individual responsibility to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And there's some things that we need to just know. But if the watchman who is observing and he sees one wander off a little bit too far, if by chance he makes it back alive, if he has to give a lecture to that little badger and say, don't do that no more, he has to take his eyes off of his sentry duties while he's doing that. So then what we're doing is we're putting everybody in danger when we wander off just a little bit too far and have to get told by the watchman. And there is some things, there's some aspects to it that locust is pretty good, ain't it? Of course, it's not coming from me. I didn't have this when I came here. Not this good. So God's talking to somebody about the locust. All right? God's talking to somebody about the locust. Spiders. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to move on to spiders. The spider taketh hold with her hands and is in kings' palaces. This is a commentary that I found. John Gill implicitly adopts the interpretation of hands. See, some people, and this is more stuff when I go out and look what other preachers are saying, and somehow they've interpreted that word as a lizard. If you read this in what all those versions, the nearly inspired version, NIV, and the ESV, and everyone's standard version, I don't know. But all these versions has some different things in it, but somehow they're talking about a lizard here. And I don't know. I'm no Hebrew expert, and they've come up with some word used somewhere else that relates to this word, and so they've interpreted this as lizard, but I'm going to stay with spider because that's what the KJV says. And if the KJV was good enough for John the Baptist, but he said that hands alludes to the thread she spins and the handiwork of the spider. And of course we see Psalms 19 says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. And in his king's palaces. John 14, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go and prepare a place for you, and I go and prepare a place for you. I will come again and receive you unto myself, and where I am, there ye may be also. And the spider, he said, the spider taketh hold with her hands. And so many different commentaries and so many different preachers will preach something different. Of course, they're talking about a lizard. But one thing that is plain there, and it said taketh hold. And what touched me the most about taketh hold is I want to make sure that I take a hold of this thing. I want a hold of all of this. I want a hold of ministering to others. I want a hold of preparing before the harvest. And I want to make sure that I take hold of the things of God. Several years ago, I took hold of this. And then I want to keep getting a tighter and tighter hold. And you know, when you can get that tighter grip and that tighter hold, you're not one that really the watchman has to really worry about. Because the watchman can take his eyes off of you for a while because you have a hold, and then you can do some things and you can help out the colony. You can be more of a help to the colony when God can guide you. And when you show up for prayer, and when you show up on Wednesday nights, and you're one of these little critters that don't have to be constantly watched and constantly checked on and constantly observed, because the watchman can look out and look at the weaker ones and spend more time watching around those. And that's what I want to be. I want to make sure that I can get a hold of this, and I can get a hold of this and hold on to this to where I don't have to be one that has to be prodded along all the time. That I can be a help to the colony and not just be a drain from the colony. Amen. I want to make sure that I can always be there for the colony. I want to be that ant that if it needs to happen, I can seal up the hole from the outside. And you can't do that unless you get a hold of this and show up and take hold and hang on.